Welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. Our goal is to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always worth your time.
In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Kathy Mace. With her nursing experience spanning over 40 years, Kathy has dedicated her career to supporting nurses across the emergency spectrum. Since 2019, she has served as the Employer Relationship Manager at BCEN, bringing her passion for education, advocacy, and creating strong bonds to champion the profession of nursing. This episode is called Building a Legacy One Day at a Time.
I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Janie Shoemaker, CEO at BCEN. Hi, Janie.
Hi, Holly.
It's great to have you with us. And in this episode, we're joined by Kathy Mace. Kathy is an emergency nurse who is also part of the team here at BCEN. It's a privilege to have one of our own as a guest on the podcast. Janie, could you please introduce us to our BCEN friend, Kathy?
I would be happy to introduce Kathy. With over 4 decades of experience in emergency nursing, Kathy Mace brings a wealth of knowledge and dedication to supporting ED and burn nurses. Beginning her career as a nurse extern in 1976, she spent 33 years in the emergency department, working both at the bedside and in leadership roles. Kathy's healthcare journey also includes time in the recovery room, house supervising, and a decade with electronic medical record company focused on ED clinicians. Since 2019, she has served as the Employer Relationship Manager at BCEN, where she continues to empower and support nurses in achieving their educational and professional goals. Kathy, welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We are excited to talk to you. You have done so many things in your career. And so I would love to start off by having you tell us, how did you start off in nursing? Did you always know you wanted to be a nurse? How'd you get started? We know you started as an extern, but how did that journey begin? Because that journey probably looks a little different maybe than it looks today. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing. And then we'll want to talk a little bit more about how you evolved into your role at BCEN, but tell us how you got your start.
Sure. Well, as we've already noted, it was way back in the 70s, so things did look a bit different then. But I didn't always want to be a nurse. Back in the day, you would be a teacher or an airline stewardess or a secretary. That was kind of what women did at that point in time. And I had gone through in between my junior and senior year in high school and had been a camp counselor and was working with kids, and that was kind of fun, but the whole teaching thing was starting to get not so appealing. And for some reason, during that summer between my junior and senior year in high school, I woke up one morning, walked downstairs and told my mom I was going to be a nurse. And her mouth dropped open and she couldn't believe it because that was not something I had ever said or was interested in. So I really feel that I was called into nursing, and probably because I enjoyed caring for people and was interested in how I could help. But that's how I decided to go that route. So then you just go through nursing school and try to see what's going to come next in your career. So as you've already stated, I did go ahead and work on a medical surgical unit for a year and then went down to the emergency department. And other than a couple of little hiatuses, usually when there was some kind of political craziness going on in the ED, I was in the emergency department. And back in the 70s, you would get maybe a 2-week orientation when you started in a new department. And so I went from a medical surgical unit down to the emergency department, got 2 weeks of orientation, And luckily for me, during that 2 weeks, we had trauma every day. It was awesome. And I was hooked. I could not even think about going anywhere else after that. It was super fun back in those days too, because we had a lot of time to ride along with some of the paramedics in the area, the fire department, paramedics, the ones that worked for the sheriff's department. So I would work 3 to 11, and then the medics would come pick me up and I'd ride half the night with them. They'd drop me back off at the hospital and I'd run home and sleep for a few hours and get up and do it all again. So it was super fun, and I loved being part of that ED family and just seeing all the patients that we would see come through the door on a daily basis.
So you're spending all those years in the ED, and I would hazard a guess to say that even the culture of the ED is pretty consistent year after year, even though you would think, well, gosh, maybe it's changing, but I haven't worked in the ED for a few years myself now. Holly still works there, so she can chime in, but I mean, we seem to still have that same basic premise of what is the ED culture and what it's like to work there. And so that knowledge is super important as you're trying to do your role at BCEN, because, you can speak the language to the bedside nurse, to the nurse leader, whatever the case. And then now that time you spent with the electronic medical record company, I know that you really had a big job with relationship management there. And so all those skills together and then some for your role at BCEN. So tell us a little bit, for those who don't know really, what's an employer relationship manager at the BCEN? What on earth does that mean? Tell us the important parts of your job. Tell us what you're doing.
Sure. Well, first of all, it is an amazing opportunity because it kind of puts the things I love to do all together in one job. With my job as the employer relationship manager at BCEN, I am really excited to be able to work with so many groups of nurses, ED leaders, and even healthcare administrators for our healthcare organizations, just to help them construct their programs for certification and to build that relationship with them as I'm helping them. I find that a lot of people don't understand what it takes to really help support their nurses as they take their journey towards certification. So I'm always really excited to be able to work with people as they start to figure out how they're going to develop their programs. And then, of course, I work with both of our voucher programs that we have at BCEN, so I can help all of the people who are interested in purchasing figure out what is best for them to purchase, what they can use the vouchers for, how to use the vouchers, and how to monitor their use. So it's really nice to be able to follow up with them routinely and be able to not only continually educate them, but to see how they do. Maybe help them troubleshoot if their nurses are not as successful as they were hoping in their journey, and then just build that relationship as we go through that process. It was kind of fun because, as you stated, coming from the electronic medical record company to BCEN, I had a lot of relationships already. So it's been fun to kind of rekindle some of those relationships. This past year, one of our certified champion nurses, the CEN winner, was actually a nurse that I had known previously in my previous life. So it was fun to go ahead and celebrate her too. So those relationships have been continued and kind of crossed both borders.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I always love the best practices that you do learn. Like there are organizations that have such a wonderful culture around professional development and certification. And I know you spend a lot of time, you've got those best practices and you share those with people that might be struggling, because it does take a while to develop a culture. It's not a switch that you can flip, would you say? Is that true?
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that a lot of times people are just given the task to increase certification, and they have absolutely no idea at that point in time what would be a good path to take. So it's nice to just be able to say, hey, I can help you and tell you what I've seen be successful at other places. That doesn't mean that X, Y, and Z is going to be successful for you, but it might be a place to start. And then we can kind of tweak as we go on.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, it's a really important role. And I know that you've been able to help nurses at many organizations who didn't previously have support from the employer be able to get support from the employer. And that's huge. That's huge because we know that nurses are going to feel more valued and they're going to be more successful when they do have that employer support. So what a critically important role you have. And boy, we're blessed that you're in it. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, I love being here and doing what I'm doing. So it's a joy to go to work every day.
This kind of segues perfectly into my next kind of conversation piece. I will say that last year in 2024, we got to celebrate a significant achievement with you. You obtained your CEN, your Certified Emergency Nurse certification, with 48 years of nursing experience to back that up. So I guess my first question for you is what motivated you to get certified at this point in your career?
That is a very good question, Holly. Well, back when I started in nursing school in the dark ages, certification, I mean, even certification bodies were very, very, very new or just about, up and running. And nursing certification was non-existent. So, you get into your career, you're working, you're doing all the things, and life is very, very busy. As time evolved and these things started coming, there were now professional organizations and certifications that you could get. We didn't have all the ways to learn about things that we do now, where we weren't plugged into social media that didn't exist. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. I mean, it wasn't an area that you could get a lot of information on. There were some monthly magazines or biannual magazines that you could get from your professional organization, but even getting information about certifications was few and far between. So fast forward a career, raising 2 kids and being busy and climbing a ladder I didn't even know I was climbing through my career. I met Janie about 15 years ago, and she was one of the first certified emergency nurses that I had ever met. And she was obviously an amazing ambassador for certification. So she had encouraged me many, many years ago to go for my certification. And again, a lot of life was happening, and I had started to study many, many times and had just never taken that last step. So as I am planning to retire in the next couple of years, I really started thinking about how incredibly important that certification was to me, because that's what I have lived for the last 40 some years of my life. And that was really important to me to be able to give that certification a try.
What a great motivation. I understand that sometimes nurses go into getting certification for a multitude of reasons, but I think deep down it really has to be something that is personally satisfying and valuable for you. And if it doesn't start there, then the rest of the motivation will eventually wear off, whether that means you certify and you never recertify but I feel like those who find it personally very valuable for the impact that certification has, they keep it up. And I'm super excited that we were able to celebrate that with you. And I like how you said, like, life has seasons, right? So sometimes it feels impossible to figure out, like, how am I going to carve out time to do this? How am I going to, because it does take studying. It does take a lot of preparation before you go and sit for that exam. So actually, that's something I'd like to ask you about as well. Like, how did you prepare to take your certification?
Yeah, so like I said, I had entertained this whole thought for several years. So I had some very outdated information that was at my home. So I actually threw all that away And I started, and this is going to be a shameless plug for BCEN. I'm so sorry, but my low-hanging fruit is BCEN Learn. And so the first thing I did was go in and sign up for the CEN Showdown and just worked on taking a whole bunch of questions just to get a feel for where I thought I was. So that was where I started. I have to say too that during BCEN Learn Live, when we've played games in the past, and I'm usually sitting at the back of the room helping do some kind of task and having a great time with that, I was also, going over the questions as they were asked, and I was finding that I was doing pretty well. I mean, I wasn't stellar, but I wasn't, I was hanging in there. So I thought, okay, it's there in your head. Let's just keep moving on. So my next step was the Jeopardy game. So I got that. And that led into last March when we released our CEN review. So I purchased the CEN review, and then more of life happened. So I thought, okay, whatever. By the way, I hadn't shared with anybody that I was studying for this. Nobody, not my kids, not Janie, nobody. So this past summer, I finally decided it was time to go. It was mid 2024. And if I was going to get this done, I needed to get going. So I did our CEN review, bought a practice exam, did that, did better the second time I took it than the first time I took it. And I thought, time to schedule your exam. So I bought myself a test assurance exam. So I had that safety net. And I took that exam on October 18th. And when I pushed the last button and it came up that I passed, I just stared at the screen for quite a while. I couldn't believe it. I've been out of clinical medicine for 20 years and I just passed my CEN. So I walked out of the test. I walked out and the girl was checking me out and she goes, "You read your results, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in shock." She goes, "Well, congratulations." So I went out to my car and I called Janie. And she
Yeah.
said, "You what?"
Yeah, it was not a phone call. Not something I was expecting you to say on your phone call, Kathy. But very cool. Very cool. Like I had no idea.
Right. So, I mean, I really, I have to give a shout out. Yes, I did spend many hours preparing and going over, taking notes, and going back to the things that I was having challenges with. But I can definitely say that the path I took worked for me. So I
Yeah.
thank BCEN for that.
Well, we are super excited that the tools and the resources that you pulled together, everybody learns a little bit differently. Everyone's experience sometimes is a little bit different too, depending on what kind of emergency department or emergency background you have. So there's always gaps. Nobody comes into the CEN exam fully and absolutely prepared just based upon what they learned in nursing school and maybe what they've seen on their unit. It's just impossible. The breadth of the exam, what the content that it covers, like everybody has to study. And I think for some people, especially if they've been in emergency nursing for a while, that can be a little bit intimidating because suddenly you realize like I am a student and I have to study and I have to take notes and I might have to do more than one course or one thing. So, but it seems like you just embraced all of it. And each time you had a little bit of success or felt like you grew a little bit, then you just built on that until, sometimes people can get stuck in that cycle of preparation. And you're absolutely right. There's something about just saying, I am scheduling this, I am committing to a date, and then just like going for it. And that's like the final hump to get on the other side. And so, like I said, super excited. I know sometimes people do prepare quietly, just it seems to take a little bit of the pressure off. But I do also understand that sometimes people just tell one person to kind of help them with accountability. But I love that you as soon as it was done, you were ready to celebrate and just, hey, let the whole world know. And we are super proud of everything that you've accomplished by doing that. So I will let Janie take over from here, but thank you for your advice on that.
Yeah, and And I know you're not this certification itself is not new to you. You've held certifications in other specialties in the past. I know you had your SANE certification. I know you had an IT certification and some performance improvement certifications. So you're not new to the certification. And I know you guys been passionate, Kathy. One thing that stands out about you is if you're going to do something, you're going to do it to the best of your ability. You're not going to, sort of mediocrely. Is that a word? You're not going to do anything in a mediocre fashion. That's what I mean to say. So you're very passionate about what you do every day. And it's your mission to help people find their way to their certification goals. If that's what they want to do, you want to help them do that. But I'd like for you to tell us in the audience, what are some common challenges that you're encountering when you try to help nurses meet their goals of becoming certified? What are some of those challenges that you see commonly?
One of the things, especially from a facility perspective, is oftentimes facilities have unique ways that they are willing to support nurses on their certification journey, or they have to fit into a corporate mold. And maybe our program doesn't fit tongue and groove with what their process is. So from a facility level, sometimes that is a big challenge. Many times, more times than not, it's a very easy thing. And so facilities can embrace what we have to offer across the board to help their nurses as they start their certification journey. But that's the biggest thing I see from a facility perspective, is just what kind of rules they may have behind reimbursement or what they're willing to provide for their nurses. From a individual nursing or group of nurses standpoint, the biggest thing is just cost of exams up front. And so when they learn about the voucher programs, they realize that they can save some money, and the money that they're looking at if they get a group of nurses together is so much less than if they do it individually on their own. So we hear often at conferences or in some of the feedback surveys that we get at BCEN that recertification or certification or you name it is too expensive. And what I say to people is, why in the world would you ever pay full price for something? BCEN has voucher programs. You can defer some of that cost. So those are kind of the biggest things that I hear as far as stumbling blocks.
I think those stumbling blocks have been around for a while, and I know it can be difficult and deflating for nurses when they do put out the money and they're successful and their organization has cumbersome reimbursement or complicated things to try to get any kind of reimbursement or support of any kind. So kudos to those organizations that are out there supporting professional development with their nurses. And I'm sure if someone's listening to this and they say, man, I wish Kathy could talk to my organization, I'm sure we can connect you to that person and you can work your magic. So
yeah. And I recently worked with a facility that we worked for a year, almost a year and a half, to be able to put something together that they would find acceptable. And they've just purchased their first set of vouchers. So I don't give up. I will wait until we can figure it out together.
Yeah. Persistence, huh?
Yep.
I think it's persistence combined with your ability to build that relationship and really recognize that, hey, there's not a one size fits all. There's common challenges, but there's not every solution works for every facility or for every individual. But what are the tools, what are the resources that we have that we can kind of mold and that you're willing to build, again, that relationship with those leaders who are like, I want to support my nurse. I'm just not sure how to get started or how to integrate this into the system that we have. So, I understand that it's super vital for you to be in that role where you're willing to work with them. And even if it takes a year and a half, you're willing to put in the time and the effort because, again, you recognize it as being something super valuable for a nurse to have that achievement. And I mean, we could probably stay on this topic all day, but you did mention Learn Live, which is our conference with BCEN. And you have been really instrumental in the focus on nurse wellness that we've done at the last several Learn Lives. And it's very obvious to me that this is yet another passion that you have for making nurses feel taken care of and even a little bit pampered. So, can you tell us why you believe that nurse wellness and taking care of our nurses is so critical for us to prioritize?
Sure. I think that as nurses, our focus is always on care of others. And so, and that's a busy and fast-paced, chaotic life in the emergency department as we do care for others. The last thing that we ever think about most generally is caring for ourselves, because we're just going from one shift to the next or home to family and then being, a mom and a wife and whatever. It's like it goes on and on and on. So really thinking about stopping and caring for ourselves, or taking a break and stepping back from the craziness that we see when we work on a daily basis. We're not super good at that. So when we started throwing around the idea of a wellness lounge, how could we give the nurses a space to go into when they come to one of our events where they can just let it go at the door? Be able to walk in there and not have to worry about if their phone is going to ping, not to worry about the patient 3 doors down, which doesn't exist because they're not at the hospital right now. But those things we can't even get out of our head. How can we give them some activities that could be in that room that maybe they could think, ooh, I might be able to do this at home, or, maybe we should have some of these in the ED break room? Or how can we just teach them other ways of self-care that they might not even be able to think about because they're just in the day-to-day, hour to hour, minute by minute at work? So that's kind of what started my thought process. And then it was just kind of fun to see if I could make it come to life.
Well, it has definitely grown. And I feel like every time you kind of incorporate like a new little twist on things or something that went really well the last time, you're like, we're bringing that back and we're going to try this. And so I think that you hit the nail on the head when you say that we, as nurses in this profession, are really focused. And our focus really should be on patients and their families and prioritizing their care when we're there. But that doesn't exclude us also keeping self-care and wellness and prioritizing that. It doesn't exclude it. If anything, we actually need to do both in order to be able to do both. So I think that by incorporating that into our conferences and hopefully providing some of those takeaways, right? Things that, hey, I really enjoyed doing this while I was at the wellness room, at the wellness lounge. I really found it relaxing. I think that we are giving nurses tools with which they can then go home and hopefully take that 5 or 10 minutes, whatever that might be while they're on shift, to kind of help them reset and get back on focusing on themselves for a few minutes, and then have them be able to go give better care to their patients and to those family members. And if we can do a lot of education at our conferences, I know that's the focus. We do a lot of clinical topics and leadership topics, and we're covering all of this clinical knowledge. But if we don't ever address the heart of nurse wellness, if we don't ever bring that up and give ways, then I feel like we did miss something. So I love that we're able to do that. I love that that's a passion of yours and that you've really been able to bring just, new life to it. So every time I'm excited to see what's coming next for Learn Live. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for all the work you put into that. We appreciate it.
Sure. Stay tuned for Colorado Springs.
Yeah. Yeah, that wellness lounge is definitely my favorite thing at the conference. Okay, well, Kathy, I now want to know if you can tell us about a person or a moment in your career that had a big impact on you.
Yeah. So, I was thinking a lot about this because there have been numerous people throughout my career, but I think the person who was most impactful to me was actually way before my career. And it was my biology teacher in high school, Scott Purvis, because he got me fired up about human biology, cell biology, all that kind of stuff that I didn't even know was a thing out in the world. And from that, I think that's where the whole nursing was birthed. So I owe a lot to him, and I have had an opportunity to actually share that with him. So just knowing that I could get excited about, a field, and that out of that one biology class, the anatomy part and the cell biology shot me in the direction of nursing. So I owe that to him, and he was a good guy. And then secondly, my med surg 2 instructor, Patty Larson, who was an amazing nurse and held us to a huge standard of making sure we knew all our disease processes and differentials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She was notorious for her exams were 13 pages, and she was amazing. And from the nursing school perspective, I owe everything to her.
Wow, a 13-page exam. Boy, I guess you better know what you're talking about. Huh.
It was crazy.
Sounds like she probably had something to do with your rigor that you have today, huh?
Possibly.
Yeah, possibly. Wow, I bet you she's a cool lady.
She was. I wish I knew where she was now, but yeah, I pulled out our nursing school composite picture, and I'm like, yep, this is the person. And
well, maybe somehow she'll listen to this. You never know.
That's true.
I had a lot of people listening. All right. Okay, Holly, you have the fun part now. I'm going to let you go with it.
I do. I say that I get the fun part of the podcast, but it's really just some rapid fire questions so we can get to know you a little bit better as a person. So, and don't try going anywhere, but what would you be doing if you were not in your current role? So if you could just choose a different career, role, job, etc., what would you try?
I would definitely be doing something with dogs. So whether it be my own doggy daycare in the backyard or, working with some group so that I could help, it would definitely be something with dogs for sure.
Well,
vet tech, something like that. I don't know.
I feel like I'm on the call with two other dog lovers as well. So that makes me super happy. And I have friends who are super passionate about animals and they volunteer and do all those things. And I love that. And I think honestly, it's just a spillover of compassion kind of aimed at animals. And yeah, I'm a dog person too. So I feel that. All right. I have some categories. We'll call them your favorites as well. So is there a favorite book or quote that really inspires you?
Well, I was thinking a lot about that, and I think that especially of late, the quote "one day at a time" is just the way I'm trying to live, because I think that I tend to try to get way too far ahead or struggle with just being present and learning how to just do one thing at a time and take one day at a time. So that is what my mantra is right now. And that's what's inspiring me.
I feel that. Sometimes I do tend to get a little ahead of myself. I would not say that I'm a planner, but there are times when I feel like, wow, you've gone too far. And if you are not careful, you will miss out on today. And you may not accomplish anything if you don't focus on today. So I feel that very, very much. What a great reminder. Okay, favorite movie, TV show, or a binge-worthy series? Because we do love a good binge-worthy series. So
I am a Dateline fanatic. Can't get enough Dateline. I think I've seen every episode on any one of those like multiple times. So it's hard for me to find one that I haven't seen. But I also find that sometimes I need to watch less Dateline because it's scary. But yeah, it's Dateline. Sorry.
oh, I love that. So you and my husband would have plenty to talk about. So I feel like I watch Dateline, but it's really actually just my husband telling me Dateline stories. So I have like a filter. I think he filters out all the ones that he feels like I wouldn't find that interesting, but then it's like he's telling me stories and they're just datelines. He's just summarizing them for me. So I get them in like a very abridged version. And then sometimes I'm like, no, let's just get to the part where they figure it out. Like
Right.
sometimes I even force him to fast forward, but yeah, y'all would have a time. I also feel like are you studying for something? But that's another story. So, all right, a favorite song or musical artist that can just kind of instantly move you.
Well, I'm kind of a 70s type of girl, so Cat Stevens, Bread, anything Dan Fogelberg, if anything like that starts playing, vivid memories of that era of my life come back. So those are my faves.
Let's go. I feel like that decade of music is just so unique. Like if you hear anything from the 70s, it's like that's where it's coming from. And I know, music tends to like overlay on itself and recreate. And even there's been a couple of songs that have come out fairly recently that I'm like, oh, that has a very 70s vibe to it, like a feel to it. But there's just something about that decade of music it's so unique. And yeah, there's definitely a groove to it. So great recommendations. Okay. Well, and I can't wait to hear this one because you're so passionate about this. So I can't wait to hear it. But like, do you have a self-care go-to or something that really helps you reset?
Yeah, I'm a huge exercise person, many different things, tennis, golf. I used to run, don't do that anymore, but walking, working out. So I've really tried to late put that back into my daily routine because that is my go-to. But that being said, there's also nothing like a good massage. So between the two of those, that would be my go-to when I need to get it back together.
I agree. I agree. There's something about moving your body, and then there's also something about having like those pressure points
Yeah.
reset that is just wonderful. I'm actually feeling my shoulders right now. I'm like, oh, I need a massage. So great recommendations. And I hope that you certainly take time to do that. And also, if you're listening to this episode, this is your shameless plug to go get some self-care and maybe a massage. So, Kathy, if our audience wanted to follow you online, what social media platforms or how could they best reach out to you?
Probably the best way to reach out to me would just be via BCEN, and that would be kmace@bcen.org, or just call the office and they can be transferred to me. I do have a Facebook account, which I'm on just under Kathy Mace, and LinkedIn, but I'm not on LinkedIn very much. So yeah, if you have any questions or want to reach out, please just email me at work.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to post that in our blog for this episode.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Kathy, I would like to thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and your passion with us today. We are so excited to have learned some good lessons from you and talk to you about your career. That's been a fascinating one with a lot of different journeys. And, you're just a testament that you can pass the CEN exam. You can do things whenever you want to do them. There's no right or wrong answer to these things. So if you feel passionate about something, I think you've shown us and told us, yes, you can do it. And we're just really grateful to be able to talk to you today and learn from you. So thank you very much for being our guest today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I want to take this time to thank Kathy for joining us for this episode of BCN and Friends. Kathy, thank you for your continuous effort to remove challenges and make the dream of certification a reality for many, many nurses over the years. Your personable touch is felt in all that you do for this profession that we love, and we truly appreciate you. And to all of our listeners, we hope you will stay tuned as we continue with BCN and Friends and bring you new, meaningful content and perspectives. If you have a suggestion for an episode, please email us at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs here with Janie Shoemaker and Kathy Mace, and on behalf of the entire BCN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.